What's going on, guys? EGM coming at you with a brand new video, and today I'm going to be talking about my predictions for UFC 214 taking place this Saturday, July 29th on pay-per-view. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now just real quick, usually I like to give my predictions for the prelims and early prelims as well, but for this video I'm just going to be breaking down the main card, but you can see the rest of my predictions in the description box down below. I just want to see which format I like better, which format you guys like better, so make sure to let me know in the comments down below. But now that I said what I needed to say, let's get right into the fights. Okay, so for the first fight on the main card, we have a light heavyweight bout between Jimmie Rivera and Volkan Ozdemir. Jimmie Rivera currently ranked 3rd in the light heavyweight division. Volkan Ozdemir made the jump to number 5. Jimmie Rivera is a good boxer, strong Muay Thai, pretty good wrestler, has a record of 17-2, 15 knockouts, 10 first-round finishes throughout his career. He's currently on a 2-fight win streak. The last time he stepped into the octagon, he knocked out Corey Anderson with a left hook to the forehead. It didn't really look like he hit him that hard, but it was enough to sleep him. Now, like I said, Jimmie Rivera has tremendous power in both his hands. He's a good boxer, pretty good takedown defense. Now, the only thing I would say about Jimmie Rivera is not necessarily in his skill set, but in his game planning. He's kind of one-dimensional. He just wants one thing and one thing only, and that's to knock you out. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but in the UFC, you're facing different guys with different styles who can win fights in a variety of different ways. But Jimmie Rivera has faced some good opponents. He does have some good wins. As I said, he's on a 2-fight win streak. He beat Ovin Prue, knocked him out. Just finished knocking out Corey Anderson, as I said, in the first round. Now, the only time he's really stepped in there with legitimate contenders, he lost. He lost to Anthony Rumble Johnson by knockout, and he lost to Alexandra Gustafsson also by technical knockout. Now he's going up against Volkan Ozdemir. Volkan Ozdemir only has 1 loss on his record. He has a record of 14-1. 10 of those wins come by knockout, and throughout his entire career, he's never been knocked out. He's 2-0 in the UFC. He made his UFC debut against Ovin Prue. He took that fight on short notice. And his last fight, he's coming off a 30-second knockout over Misha Serkinov. Now, he does have good power in his hands, obviously. He's a strong grappler. And being that he's never been knocked out, I'd say that he has a pretty solid chin. But I just haven't seen enough of him to say that he's going to be able to eat a punch from Jimmie Rivera. Jimmie Rivera just has so much power. I think he's going to hurt him early, and I think it's going to take little time for Jimmie Rivera to put Volkan Ozdemir away. So I do see him knocking out Volkan Ozdemir in the first round. Now the next fight is an exciting one. We have a welterweight bout between the former champ Robbie Lawler and Donald Cowboy Cerrone, the people's main event. Now I say this is the people's main event because this is a fight that brings joy to the UFC fan base. I mean, this is two guys that are always game, are always pushing forward, always pushing the pace, and always like to stand there in the center of the octagon and bang. These are just two fighters that the UFC fans genuinely enjoy watching because of their fight style, because they love putting on a show for the fans. Okay, so now that I've told you why I'm excited about the fight, let's get into the fighters. We have Robbie Lawler, the former champion. Now, Robbie Lawler is a good boxer, a really good wrestler, has a record of 27 wins, 11 losses. 20 of his wins come by knockout, and 12 are first-round finishes. Now, Robbie Lawler is just an excellent example of resiliency and never giving up on your dream. I mean, this is a guy, right, that made his UFC debut at UFC 37, which is in 2002. After his UFC debut, he had a record of 4-3 in the UFC. He left. He then fought in other promotions like Elite XC, Strikeforce. He came back in 2013, where he won straight. Eventually, he got a title shot for the vacant belt against Johnny Hendricks once George St. Pierre retired. He lost that fight via split decision. After that fight, he won 2 straight against Matt Brown, Jake Ellenberger, and then he got a rematch against Johnny Hendricks, and this time he got the job done. He beat Johnny Hendricks via decision. He then defended his belt 2 times against Rory McDonald and Carlos Condit. Now, his last title defense on July 30th of 2016, he got obliterated by Tyron Woodley. He was knocked out cold in the first round. Now this Saturday when he faces Donald Cowboy Cerrone, it'll be 1 day shy of being a full year that he has not stepped inside the octagon. So because of how devastating his loss was, I'm not sure how Robbie Lawler is going to come back, if he's going to be the same Robbie Lawler, the champion Robbie Lawler. Now this Saturday in his return, he's not taking on a warm-up fight. He's taking on the 7th ranked welterweight in the world, Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Cerrone's a really good boxer, one of the best Muay Thai practitioners in the UFC, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has a record of 32-8, a record of 19-5 in the UFC. He's 4-1 in the welterweight division. The last time he stepped into the octagon was back in January in his backyard in Denver, Colorado. He fought Jorge Masvidal. Now, Jorge Masvidal absolutely pieced him up. He boxed him up really nice. He wobbled him badly at the end of the first round. It looked like he was going to finish it. Cerrone survived. In the second round, Jorge Masvidal landed a few more beautiful combinations and eventually finished Donald Cerrone via TKO. Now, Cerrone, throughout a majority of his career, was a lightweight. He competed with guys like Eddie Alvarez, Rafael dos Anjos, Edson Barbosa, Ben Henderson. He recently made the move up to welterweight. As I said, he's 4-1 in the welterweight division. He beat Rick Story, Patrick Cote, Alex Cowboy Oliveira. So Jorge Masvidal was his first real test at the welterweight division, and as we all know, he didn't pass. Now, so it's going to be interesting to see how Donald Cerrone matches up with an elite welterweight like Robbie Lawler. Now, like I said, Cerrone's a strong kickboxer. He's a really good boxer, really accurate with his punches, a really good wrestler, and excellent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. 16 of his professional wins come by submission. But this is how I see the fight playing out. Now, Donald Cerrone's a former lightweight. Robbie Lawler has actually competed in the middleweight division. So Robbie Lawler is much bigger and he's much stronger. Now, the scary thing about Robbie Lawler is the more punishment he takes, the harder he comes on. And I just think that his pressure is going to be a bit too much for Donald Cerrone. But one thing I do know, this is going to be a war and it's going to go the distance. I just think Robbie Lawler is going to be too much and he's going to come away with unanimous decision victory. Now, next up, we have a women's featherweight bout for the vacant featherweight title between Cris Cyborg and Tonya Evinger. Now, the title was actually Germaine de Randamie's. She actually beat Holly Holm in a controversial decision, but she vacated it because she didn't want to defend the belt. I guess she didn't want to fight Cris Cyborg, and I don't blame her, but the point is that no one has the belt, and these two women have an opportunity to become a champion. Now, Tonya Evinger is 37 years old. She's a really good boxer, has a background in wrestling, has a career record of 19-5, 8 knockouts, 7 submissions. She's a former Invicta Bantamweight champion, and she's currently on a 10-fight win streak. Now, on the other hand, she's going up against the scariest woman on the planet, Cris Cyborg. Cris Cyborg has a record of 16-1, 1 no contest. 15 of her professional victories come by knockout. Her only loss was her very first professional fight. Since then, she's won 16 straight. She's TKO'd or KO'd her last 11 opponents. She's currently 2-0 in the UFC. She won her UFC debut against Leslie Smith. The last time she stepped into the octagon was against Lena Landsberg. She knocked her out in the second round. So to sum up Cris Cyborg's career, she pretty much knocks out every opponent that she faces. So it's obvious she has very good power, very accurate with her punches, a really good boxer, pretty good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but her gas tank is not too good. A lot of her opponents believe or set out the game plan that if they can take the fight into the later rounds, it'll work in their favor. But many of them just don't make it that far into the fight because that's how much power she has. Now, back to Tonya Evinger. Evinger is game. Now, she does have some good things working for her. Like I said, she's a smooth boxer. She's a really good wrestler. So if she can kind of grind Cris Cyborg up against the cage and kind of wear her down, take her down, maybe hold her there for a while, she may have a chance to win this fight. Now, for Cris Cyborg, all she has to do is just land that one shot on the button. Now, Tonya Evinger has never been knocked out in her career, but that's due to change. I just don't think that 37-year-old chin can hold up against Cris Cyborg's best punch. Now, this is how I see the fight going down. I see Tonya Evinger coming out, and actually see Tonya Evinger putting the pressure, trying to get Cris Cyborg's back against the cage, trying to wear her down, grind her up in the clinch, try her best to get the fight to the ground. But at the end of the day, Cris Cyborg is just way too strong, and it's not going to take long for Tonya Evinger to realize that. But like I said, I do see her coming out in the first round, and I do see her having some success. Maybe she takes her down once, maybe twice in the first round. And I think the world is going to be kind of shocked and say, hey, maybe this girl has a chance. Maybe she has an opportunity to shock the world and beat Cris Cyborg. But in the second round is when I see Tonya Evinger trying to repeat the same thing, trying to get Cyborg to the ground. Cris Cyborg stuffing those takedowns and eventually landing that bomb on the chin of Tonya Evinger and knocking her out cold. Now, the real challenge for Cris Cyborg in this fight is not necessarily going to be Tonya Evinger, but who she's going to fight next. After she beats Tonya Evinger, who's she going to fight? There's not many girls that are willing to step inside the octagon with Cris Cyborg because she's just that much of a beast. Maybe Amanda Nunes will move up and try to challenge her. Germaine de Randamie, maybe she'll muster up the courage to fight her. Holly Holm maybe, who knows? But I just know that I do see Chris Cyborg coming away with an easy victory this Saturday. Now for the co-main event of the evening, we have a bout for the welterweight championship of the world. The champion Tyron Woodley versus the number one contender Damian Maia. Now this fight makes for an intriguing matchup because of the contrast in their styles. We got Tyron Woodley, a power puncher / wrestler, and Damian Maia, one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners the UFC has ever seen. Now, Tyron Woodley is the champion. As I said, he's a really good boxer, excellent power in his hands, a really strong wrestler, has a record of 16-3, 7 knockouts, 4 submissions. He's only been knocked out once in his career, and that was to Nate Marquardt. He's never been submitted. He's a former Division I college wrestler, wrestled at Missouri University, and has a UFC record of 7 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. Now, he's beaten some really good competition. He's beaten Kelvin Gastelum by decision. Carlos Conde. He knocked out Robbie Lawler in under 3 minutes to get the welterweight title of the world. Now, his first defense didn't go too well. He fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, one of the best strikers in the UFC. That fight was really close. I think Stephen Thompson won 3 rounds. He was on his way to winning, but in the 4th round, Tyron Woodley wobbled him bad, hurt him badly twice, actually, in the 4th round. That round was a 10-8. So because the 10-8 round, the fight ended up being a majority draw. Now, he awarded Stephen Thompson an immediate rematch. Now, that fight kind of played out similarly. Stephen Thompson was winning on the scorecards, in my opinion. There wasn't too much action going on. But I had Stephen Thompson doing enough to win at least 3 rounds. In the 5th round, Tyron Woodley wobbled Stephen Thompson bad. He hurt him badly. It looked like he was going to finish the fight, but Stephen Thompson survived just the same way he did in the first fight. Now, in my opinion, Stephen Thompson won that fight. It wasn't a draw because I don't think the 5th round was a 10-8 round. I think Stephen Thompson deserved to take the belt home, but they gave it to Tyron Woodley. Now, those were the only 2 times that Tyron has defended his belt. And because, like I said, the first one was a draw and the second one was extremely controversial, as many people thought that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson won, he hasn't really had a clear, solid title defense. Now, this Saturday, he's going to be facing Damian Maia. Damian Maia is a 4th degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He has a record of 25-6. 12 of his wins come by submission. And even though there are fighters that have been better strikers than Damian Maia, he's only been knocked out once in his entire career. He's been in the UFC since 2007. He's a veteran. He's a former middleweight contender. He's fought for the belt. He actually fought Anderson Silva. He has a record of 19-6 in the UFC. He made the move to welterweight in 2012, and he's currently 10-2 in the welterweight division. His only losses coming to Jake Shields and Rory McDonald, but he's on a 7-fight win streak. He's beaten the likes of Ryan LaFleur, Neil Magny, Gunnar Nelson, Matt Brown, Carlos Condit, and most recently this past May at UFC 211, Jorge Masvidal. Now, that fight with Jorge was actually pretty close. Masvidal obviously got the better of the exchanges on the feet. Damian Maia had some pretty good positioning on the ground. Didn't really do too much with it. There was a few times where Maia had Masvidal's back, but wasn't able to capitalize with the submission. That was really close. I wasn't mad at the decision. They ended up giving it to Damian Maia. It was a close fight, but nonetheless, it put Damian Maia in the position where he's at now, and that's an opportunity to win the welterweight title of the world. Now back to Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley possesses so much power in his hands, it's ridiculous. I mean, the guy hits you with one shot and it has the potential to put you to sleep. Now, Damian Maia, on the other hand, has one goal and one goal in mind, and that's to get you to the ground and make you fall victim to his beautiful, beautiful Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, the guy, it doesn't matter what level of Jiu-Jitsu you are, Damian Maia makes you look like an amateur. So if Damian wants to win the fight, obviously he's going to have to get the fight to the ground. He's going to have to do everything in his power to get Woodley to the ground and take advantage of Woodley's inferior Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Woodley will not be able to hang with Damian Maia on the ground. I guarantee you that. Now, if Woodley wants to win this fight, obviously he's going to have to stop Damian Maia from getting him to the ground. And once he stops a few of Damian Maia's takedowns, it's going to be Woodley's fight from then on. Now, this is how I see the fight playing out. Obviously, I see Damian Maia coming out early, bouncing around on the feet for a little while, waiting for an opening, and then he's going to shoot. Now, Damian Maia may very well get Tyron Woodley to the floor once, maybe twice. Now, obviously, you see the difference in their frames. Tyron Woodley looks like the much stronger fighter. He has a way wider frame. But Damian Maia, make no mistake, Damian Maia is very strong. Jorge Masvidal even says so himself. He was very surprised at how strong Damian Maia was. So Damian Maia can get Tyron Woodley to the ground. He really can, but he won't. And once he won't, then obviously the fight's going to be forced to be standing. And that favors Tyron Woodley. So like I said, Damian Maia is going to shoot. Tyron Woodley's going to stuff it. And Damian Maia's going to have nowhere else to go, because what good is Damian Maia's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu if he can't get his opponent to the ground? So Woodley's going to stuff it, and eventually Woodley's going to land that clean shot in the first round and put Damian Maia to sleep. So there will be no new welterweight champion of the world. It'll be Ann Still, and Tyron Woodley will end Maia's dream of becoming a world champion. And now we move on to the main event of the evening, the fight we've all been waiting to see. A battle for the Light Heavyweight Championship of the world between the champion Daniel Cormier and arguably the greatest fighter of all time, Jon Jones, the #1 contender. Now that's funny to say that Jon Jones is the #1 contender, because he is the former champion. Now he's the former champion not necessarily because anybody else beat him, not because he was dethroned, but because he beat himself. Jon Jones was at one time on top of the light heavyweight division. He was the youngest world champion ever at age 23, dethroned Shogun, who a future Hall of Famer, and eventually defended his title 8 times, setting the division record. And in the midst of his historic title run, he defended his belt against the likes of Daniel Cormier, Lyoto Machida, Vitor Belfort, Alexander Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira, Rampage Jackson, Rashad Evans. The list goes on and on. Now, as I said, him and Daniel Cormier have fought before, and there's bad blood between them, as we all know. So leading up to Jon Jones' fight with Daniel Cormier, there was tons of trash talking. As you saw, they even threw punches at one of the press conferences, one of the face-offs. And throughout all the media obligations and things like that, they developed this real, authentic hate for each other. So they squared off at UFC 182. It was actually a pretty competitive fight, but Jon Jones decisively won a majority of the rounds, came away with a unanimous decision victory. Now after that, a drug test actually revealed cocaine in Jon Jones' system. Jon Jones lost his belt and was suspended indefinitely. Daniel Cormier was gifted a title shot against Anthony Rumble Johnson for the vacant belt, where Daniel Cormier submitted Anthony Johnson in the 3rd round via rear naked choke. He then proceeded to defend his belt against Alexander Gustafsson. Then Jon Jones cleared suspension. Jon Jones was eligible to return. The rematch was scheduled for UFC 200, and then the bout was scratched a few days before the fight because Jon Jones was discovered to have PEDs in his system. So the fight was scratched. Daniel Cormier fought Anderson Silva. It wasn't for a belt. It was only a 3-round fight. Beat him decisively via unanimous decision. And then he defended his belt against Anthony Rumble Johnson in a rematch where he submitted Rumble in the 2nd round. Now all this was happening while Jon Jones was on the sidelines, and now he's cleared. And now they are scheduled to fight this Saturday. So it's been a long-awaited rematch. Now Jon Jones is, in many people's eyes, the greatest of all time. There's just simply nothing that man cannot do. He's an excellent wrestler, a really good kickboxer, really unorthodox striking, likes to use his elbows in creative ways, likes to use his knees, oblique kicks, and things like that. So his striking is very creative. He has a record of 22-1. Now, the only blemish on his record is not an actual loss. He was actually disqualified for illegal elbows against Matt Hamill. Now, the man is technically undefeated and never really lost his belt to an actual opponent. He only lost his belt because of the city decisions that he made, and because of that, Daniel Cormier is now the champion. Daniel Cormier is an Olympic wrestler, a really good boxer, has a record of 19-1. His only loss obviously coming to Jon Jones. 6 knockouts, 7 submissions. Former Division I college wrestler, and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. Now, DC is a really big dude. He competed in the heavyweight division when he first came to the UFC. He beat the likes of Roy Nelson, Frank Mir. He moved down. As I said, he's beaten Anthony Johnson twice. He's beaten Alexander Gustafsson. He beat Patrick Cummins. He beat Dan Henderson, Anderson Silva. The list goes on and on. So he's beaten some pretty stiff competition, but he just hasn't beaten Jon Jones. And that does not sit well with him. He's been waiting 2 years to get another crack at Jon Jones. And if Jon Jones keeps himself in order, if he really wants this fight as much as he says he does, and he shows up Saturday, Daniel Cormier is going to have another opportunity. Now, if Daniel Cormier wants to win the fight, he has to pressure the same way that he did in the first fight, because he did a good job of pressuring Jon Jones, of making Jon Jones back up. Jon Jones did look a bit uncomfortable for the first 2 rounds. Daniel Cormier did land a few good shots to the chin of Jon Jones, but he just wasn't able to keep that pace up. Now this time, I'm expecting Daniel Cormier to come in, in better condition with a better gas tank and being able to pressure Jon Jones throughout the entirety of the fight. DC has a really good chin, as I said, a really good boxing. He has power in both hands, and he has a sickening work ethic. I mean, it's really hard to find someone in the UFC that works as hard and is as motivated as Daniel Cormier for this fight. And you're gonna see that early on. Daniel Cormier keeps saying in the interviews, he keeps saying, I'm going to punch this guy in the face. From the minute the fight starts to the minute it ends, I'm going to be in his face nonstop. And I completely expect that. But I just don't think that's going to be enough for Jon Jones. Jon Jones is just as motivated, if not more motivated, because he lost his life. He know what he did to lose that belt, and he wants it back. Now, in order to beat Jon Jones, you have to have something on him. You have to be his height. You have to have reach on him. You know, as we saw, Daniel Cormier is an Olympic wrestler, and Jon Jones got the better of the wrestling exchanges in their past fight. I just don't think that Daniel Cormier at 39 years old or 38 years old has the tools to beat Jon Jones. Jon Jones is going to come and he's going to set the distance early. He's going to throw all kinds of kicks, and I do see him stopping Daniel Cormier in the third round via technical knockout. I just don't think that Daniel Cormier has enough to beat Jon Jones at this point in his career. Jon Jones is on another level. And despite the ring rust, forget about the ring rust. Looking at Jon Jones' eyes in interviews, he wants this badly. And I think that there's nothing or nobody that's going to stop Jon Jones from regaining his title. So like I said, I see Jon Jones TKOing Daniel Cormier in the third round. Now, if you like these predictions, make sure you click that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Thanks, guys.